And I have to say that she also is a distinguished pastelist of the Society of New Mexico. What? I was really surprised to see that. And so we welcome Terri Ford for her demonstration. I'm thrilled to have her. Here.
Hi, Letty. Thank you for the introduction. I was like going, oh, is that what?
Yes. Yes.
The things you've done. But when the first year that I ever entered anything was Pastel Society of the West Coast and Pastel Society of New Mexico. And so I entered your shows way back in early 2000s, like 2001 or 2 or something like that. And I won a really good prize. And I was really thrilled to death about it, So anyway, I've always felt a connection to you guys in New Mexico. And I think I judged your show one year. I came and did a workshop in the Heritage, is that the name of the facility where the show was? So Marilyn, I really want to thank her because she just always puts a nice listing of my information in, and I always appreciate that so much. So thank you, and thank all of you for being here. So basically what my mantra that has developed, and really I'm still doing it, is deeper, darker, richer. And the reason for that is I discovered as I discovered underpainting that I really don't like to see white spots coming through. I wanted to see color. And really, when I hearken back to working on Canson plain paper before underpainting and before sanded papers were around, I would put in, let's say, a tree where there's a lot of shadow, but light on top of that shadow. To get the shadow in, I'd put a lot of dark pastel, blend it with my hands, and then spray it with fixative to get some sort of tooth back. And so I was really essentially doing underpainting in a roundabout way before I was actually doing underpainting. It was just, how could I get some pigment under there so I can paint the light on top of it? And that's pretty much the essence of my approach, is I want to get information on the surface before I paint the light. And the light is always the last to come in for me. And when I build light in a painting, I always start with pastels that are deeper, darker, and richer than the local color is going to be. And in that way, it's kind of like oil painting, where they say thin to thick, dark to light. It's very similar, because when I do the underpainting, sets that first layer of pastel, so there's your thin, dark layer, and then building up in increments of value, so that, and with a light pressure, this enables me to layer on top and get depth in the painting, as opposed to just going like, let's say I'm working on white. I never work on white. I have to have tone on my paper, and I need to have those shadows there in order to, give me my bearings. And so working on white, if I were to, go into light areas, I just feel I need to have the darkest values on the surface to begin with. And then also that expanded to where I would break up the color palette. For instance, I start all my paintings with New Pastel Spruce Blue 305. And I've been doing that for so long, and it just still works for me. And so that gets all the dark areas. But then let's say I have a grass that's a light green. I may throw in some red in the foreground, because red works well with green. It works as a complement. It also works as earth tone. So that's kind of a dual thing. And I can do it in trees as well. And depending on the value of that light that's hitting would determine the value of the red I would use undergreen. Sometimes it'll be a deep, rich burgundy. Other times, if it's a really high key light green grass, it might just be a pure red or even an orangier red. If it's in the foreground, it could often be a warmer red versus a cooler red in an area that's further back or higher up, or depending. So there's infinite varieties of combinations of multicolor to use on an underpainting. It's just endless. And I really like to say that you cannot ruin an underpainting, because even if it all blends together, even if it does go muddy, you'll have a surface that you can't buy. So if you set it all, you can always work right on top. So I just don't see that you can ruin it. I've definitely done many underpaintings where I thought, oh shoot, I really wanted this to be a little more this, or this a little more that. That happens, but that's how I've learned about different color combinations. So I've developed certain go-to colors for certain things. And let's see, there's such an infinite amount of stuff to say about underpainting, but what comes into play is temperature. There's combinations of using complementary colors for certain effect. And there's also the same thing could be painted in a deeper, darker, rich local color. So I've done demos of a painting in one way and then do it in the other way, which are totally different approaches, but they're both valid and doable. So it just goes on and on in terms of what you can put down and why you put it down. And I do have a lot of thought process behind it, and you'll see somehow things get really crazy and messy looking. And you might say, well, why even bother drawing when you just blur it all out in the wash process? But to me, every step is at least getting into my brain. So I'm establishing things in my mind about the image, and some of it may get lost and blurred in the wash process, but I still have it in my mind because I went through the step of drawing. And drawing is pretty essential in terms of when there's kind of a crazy underpainting, that value relativity can get lost. So that's important to point out. If value challenged people might want to avoid doing too much multicolor. It can be done monochromatically with one color. And so the values remain relative to the actual image. When I do multicolor underpaintings, and I'll point that out, and it'll be pretty clear that the value relativity can get lost. So it's important to know why you're putting a certain color down. And in applying the color, I use directional marks so that if things get too crazy, once the wash has gone down, the direction of the marks will help me. For instance, vertical trees, I'll usually go up and down. A horizontal plane will be a horizontal swash mark. So those things help me flesh out my image if my underpainting gets too crazy and loses a lot of value relativity. That's how I keep track of what's going on. So anyway, what I think I'll do is just show you an example of something I did a long time ago. And let's see if you can see that. This is just an underpainting. And the theory behind this is a desert scene. The dark part is the 305 spruce blue new pastel. And the yellow, red, and blue are temperature underpainting, because this foreground is very warm and in the foreground, and everything else goes back. So I really wanted just a temperature and value underpainting. And I wanted it to be rich color, and a sheer. And that's another thing. By using the harder pastels, and I really look for pure pigment in the pastels, I avoid white in the pastels when I'm doing the underpainting, because I can get a more sheer wash when I apply the liquid. It is very doable to do white color. It's just not my approach. I've seen Elizabeth Mowry demo, and she uses white and then does her wash, and of course comes out with beautiful work that way. This just kind of evolved for me as what I strive for in my underpaintings is sheer, deep, rich, vivid color. And then also as I'm building paintings, adding light, I try to avoid white lights there as well. That's where the increments of value working up is done. You know, I'm always reaching for pure pigment before white. So if I have a green thing that's being hit by light, I'm not going to look for a light green pastel. I'm more than likely going to look for something that's going to bounce off of that green with pigment. And I have found that lately, when I'm painting, I am hunting and pecking like crazy. And I'm getting so many pastels piled up in front of my paintings because I'm constantly looking for, oh no, I need more pigment. No, this is too white, you know, and I'm putting them down instead of putting them back. But I'm just constantly seeking more pure color, less white. And it's the number of white pastels in my palette is far less than everything else. So that's just another thing that it's, you know, that's a personal thing to me, where I just want to have color say light and not white. I'll show you one other image. This is a very recent underpainting. I don't want to get glare on. There we go. So this is a bunch of cypress trees, mountains going back, and a sunset. So it's just all dark. And as you can see how the values are not all that, slightly different angles to get that light off of it. Sorry, my light in the morning is bad in here. I don't know if you can see that well enough, but it's all pretty dark. And a lot of what defined my images was the direction. The trees being in vertical marks and all the mountains when I'm washing it, it's the same thing. I'm using direction to apply the wash. The pastel's been laid down in a direction, hills going back in diagonals, and as it comes forward, more horizontal, and then all the tree stuff's happening with vertical marks. So that when I get all these values that are very close together, because it's a sunset in this case, I want it to be dark. I want to have it to always be darker than it's going to be. And I want to use color notes. I've got red and kind of burgundy in the foreground. Actually, the light probably does show it better, as you can see. But so there's burgundy red in the foreground. And as it gets back further, it's cooler. Those hills, even with the sunset, are more of a blue. So there's temperature changes going on in here as well. And that's where value relativity can get a little bit lost. So this is a very typical underpainting. I just did this recently and I'm ready to get going on that. So my technique just has not changed. That's why I'm teaching the same thing I've taught for a while, because it's still what I do. And it's still the formula works for me. And the formula doesn't get boring because each one can be different. And I think I like that tactile, just working out the composition with the drawing portion of it. And then getting a brush out with, I've used denatured alcohol for years at the hardware variety in the paint department. It's been banned in California, so I can't find it anymore. So I've been using isopropyl alcohol. I don't care for it quite as much. It has, isopropyl was just what worked well for me, my timing, my flow. of applying. And but I've had to switch, which is kind of a bummer. I need somebody to smuggle denatured alcohol into me here in California. So anyhow, I'll go ahead. Should we start the images? What I'm presenting are just variations on underpainting. And they're all multicolor, and I can just comment on why I used certain color versus something else. So, and feel free if you have questions to ask me. I'll just blather on about what I was thinking when I did this. This final painting is just one of two. And the drawing portion is for the image here. The wash was for the other one. They're kind of like brother, sister paintings. But when I was doing them, I don't always remember to take a photo at every phase. So this is the first step of the painting. They both are very similar in their colors. That's why I did this. The wash portion is for the other, so it's a slightly different composition, but I did them both the exact same way. So as you can see with all this, yellow grass, the purple underneath works to show the shadows and complements the yellow. And the magenta or the fuchsia sky, I do pink and variations on pink skies a lot. And it just, I think, adds a richness to this blue. I just did a painting. I think it's in this presentation too, the same thing. It just has a way of working with the blues. And in this case, I went with a cooler blue because I knew I wanted to go with a nice true blue type of sky. And there's a little bit of turquoise because I tend to play with those together, but they're the same value mostly. So anyhow, that is my step of, and I think you can see the sky, my marks when I do the sky are kind of all over because sky is atmosphere. Unless there's a cloud situation that's really wind blowing, that I'll show that direction, but open skies, I kind of just, the marks are, okay, so this is it's the same thing. And you can see I used some pink in the sky, pink in the water. It's a reflection of the sky. And something I definitely do, the 305, which is the marks for the value, in the sand, all that green foliage that's growing, I overpaint it. I overpaint the tree silhouettes so that when I get my local color and I'm building the painting, I can sculpt around to achieve the shape. With the sky and with the sand, I was able to go in. I had plenty of dark foliage and design those marks to pick them out. And that all was sculpting around the dark that I did in the underpainting. That's a big thing. I find myself really thinking in terms of sculpting a lot. Once I have this dark stuff, pigment on my paper, then I find it really fun. To me, one of the funnest things to do is a tree shape where sky meets tree and achieving that with this sculpting process and overdoing the dark so that I can flesh out the form as I paint and just design it while I'm doing it. You leave quite a bit of spruce. Let's see, I'm going to read a question here. A spruce blue showing in the final painting. That's an excellent question. And yes, and Letty, the paper is UART 400. Okay, so the 305 spruce blue, yes, a lot of it shows in. I don't, kind of like you can see an essence of all the color that's been used in the underpainting. Some more, some less. Some I lay down harder. The sand in this painting, you can see the kind of a granular effect. I wanted that for texture for the sand. So, and then yes, if you look in at the bushes and you see the light hitting it, the shadow that's there was from the underpainting. And there are times when I'll go in and reinforce the shadow and add dark pastel, but having dark already there, you know, you don't have white spots jumping out in a dark area. And so I like having texture in them, and I like to scumble and have that pigment showing through, but I do want pigment that plays a part in the final painting, not just white. So I'm not sure who asked that question about the spruce blue, but yes, in many cases, a lot of the color shows through. You'll look and you can see spots of that dark, that burgundy red in the foreground grasses. And under the pastel, that's where the yellow is in the underpainting, that's still, that's showing through, because I've just scumbled over enough that is influencing the surface, the color of surface color. Yeah. Here in this sky, I use the turquoise. So, you know, my decisions on what color I use for the skies varies. This was a very cool scene, so I stayed with a blue hue as opposed to the pink. I really find I'd use the pink a lot when there is sun out and there is a brilliant sky. In the case of this, it's a cool sky, and so I kept it. Now, when I look at the final painting, I don't see much of that turquoise there. But I still think that when I lay pastel down, I want a reaction with the surface. And that's a lot of the premise of why I put tone down, is I get a reaction from the.
That's as big as the screen.
Yeah, that's good. That's complete.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Much better.
Yeah, thank you. That's good. And here is a use of the burgundy red under the grasses, and you can see little hints of it coming through. So yes, the underpainting, I let it show whenever it works. And I guess probably the time when it wouldn't show as much is if I were, you know, just worked a painting. I wouldn't say overwork it, but sometimes work it more. So there's more pastel on the surface than others. So sometimes, yeah, you see a lot of the underpaintings, sometimes less. But I think that anytime there's going to be, because I like to scumble and have texture, there's going to be surface showing through, and I want it to be a color. And so what color is that? That's kind of the choices, the decisions that, you know, I make as I go. So although this technique is kind of formulaic, the selections are always vary one by one as to what sky, what am I feeling from the image. And also something I should point out is that I use this exact technique whether I'm painting in the studio or in plein air. Now this is a studio painting, and I believe that the one before it was the pink sand sunset one. I forget what the first one was, but anyway, they're a mix. I think when I went through after to check them, that I had about equal number of plein air and studio paintings in this presentation. So, okay, we can push on to the next unless there are any questions. Oh yeah, that first, these were plein air. There, and then, like I say, there was a second one. Okay, this, you know, that step 2 where I show the wash, it's kind of brownish. I think I know what happened here. The red or the orange that I used in the drawing of this underpainting. Yeah, there. Thank you. Perfect. When it washed, it paled a little bit as opposed to getting deep enough. So that's something I would probably have preferred to do in just something a little more. It looks like pure pigment on the drawing portion, but when it washed, it flattened a bit. But again, see, I would have preferred a real vibrant underpainting there. It went flat, and then it mixed in with the 305 in places, and it kind of browned that. And none of that hurts the final product. I always, like I say, strive for this, very pure, sheer, deep, dark, rich pigment. And sometimes I end up with something like this. The key is that I've overpainted all of the stuff that's going to be in shadow, so that it's a big job of sculpting, and it's a lot of fun. All up here, sculpting with the sky, sculpting and designing, going into this and coming out with this, just making choices along the way of where I'm going to mark around the dark of the underpainting. And pretty much, I probably did darken some areas and go in to, you're not able to see my cursor, are you? I'm running the cursor over to point things out, and you guys can't see that. But the sky area between the main tree sections, that's, all that's, all of it's sculpted. The sky is sculpting the shape of the trees and the foliage that's showing. And then I can go back with the dark and do calligraphy on the edges of the foliage to, do the drawing, fine tuning sort of marks that I want. Yeah. And, key up the light in increments. So it starts out darker and ends up with just a scumble, really, of lighter. There's a couple shades of lighter than the orange that's on the bottom of the 3 steps. So I have that is showing through, but it's scumbled over. Really, on the upper portion of the trees, it's pretty much that stuff. I just scumbled there and didn't feel a need to go in and key it up, so that it brought the focal point to be those branches with the highest key light, and let everything else support that. Okay, any questions? All right, now this is an older piece. This was a plein air painting. It was a demonstration for a workshop at the Amish village in, it was in New Hampshire. And to be honest, the buildings in the Amish village were a little pristine and perfect for me. And so I walked to the furthest end of the village and painted away with the village behind me, and just painted the landscape, because that's what was speaking to me. And this is a good example of the multicolor, approach. Well, all of it was, but, using, even in a light sky, this deep, dark, rich yellow. And this, again, I'm pointing to it with my own cursor. The orange on the bottom is, just, to me, it's saying dirt. The darker red behind the orange is just saying this is further away and it's cooler. So, and then when I paint my local color, those are my notes to myself. Although I'm still looking at the scene, this is beneficial, especially if the light is shifting, and having those notes that okay, this is cooler than the foreground. And then having so here's a case where the yellow is coming through the sky. So it was just scumbling lighter shades. And this is a case where there is a light, high key sky. And I think it's not flat because there's that bright yellow shining through and gives it a little, more richness. Yeah. And I used the red under the green foliage of the little bush to the left of the tree. in the wash process, you see how the tree trunks are done solid, 305 solid. And what I used on top of that, and it's kind of a go-to color, is the New Pastel 244. I believe it's called Blue Violet. And I will usually mark tree trunks that have some tone, but they're not lit with that color. It is a go-to. And then lighten it just a bit or add warmth to it with something that's not too much darker to keep those tree trunks from popping out too far or getting lost in the underpainting. And then all the stuff to the right behind the green grass is sculpted out of the stuff that 305 that I set. And then the little landmass on the other side of that water is sculpted by the sky. So that underpainting holds it pretty well. And, I make adjustments so I can just scumble lightly over underpainting. So really what you're looking at in the end is a combination of the underpainting and the surface color. So yeah, I'm just looking through it. Okay, here we go. This was a plein air also. This was a demo I did for a workshop. And so, just making decisions on the spot about color and knowing that it's going to, the purple and the blues in the wash run together. But I think there you can see pretty well the direction of the marks on the rocks are diagonal and, kind of say on the rock, and the water is laid down very horizontally because I want that gravity. I want it to lay flat. And rocks in the foreground, I just really kind of was saying, what do I want to do there? And came up with this, brilliant, rich gold. And you do see it in the final product. If you look down, you'll see the orange stuff coming through. And so the choice of the purple here was complement to the yellowish brown, the warm browns that the rocks were. And that's why I chose that. And of course, it's also mixed in, the darker parts of the rocks are the 305. And one of the reasons I use the 305, and that it's worked out for me, and I continue to like it, is that it can be warm or cool. And being that it's called a spruce blue, that says cool in the name, but the spruce is warm. And that is a color, it's super dark. It can go very dark. I want to get the darkest darks I can out of it. And with that pastel versus any of the others, other than black of New Pastel in particular, will give me the broadest range of value by applying it more and more densely, as in the first drawing phase of this, the wave crests. Those I put down heavier, and I get that heavy value, and then lighten up where it doesn't need to be quite as dark. So that is why I use that. And it does have, as I said, depending on what's with it, what's on it or next to it, will affect the temperature. It can go either way. It can read as warm and it can read as cool. So I like that about it. It's not decidedly cool or decidedly warm. It's got bits of both. So, and so I do think about temperature with this as well. The warm colors way up front and the cooler colors receding. Okay. Any questions? Okay, this is a very recent painting. And so pretty typical for me. The sky, I went with that rich sky in a sunlit, under a sunlit, and it really contributes. There's a lot of that showing through, but it's all scumbled on the surface, but that pink and, color really comes through. In the foreground is that the green grass, and I just love scumbling the green on top of that red and letting the red show through whenever it can. And this one ended up being called the red roof. It did not have a red roof, but when I put the red in, I still had the red. I hadn't painted the green grass in, and I loved the dynamic that it had with the underpainting. And so I left it red, and I called it Red Roof is the name of the painting. And also then the other thing is the green tree is red. It was a warm tree, and so those reds are warm. The sky is cool. Yeah, just used, as you can see, everything gets tinted. There's not a whole lot of, there's no real white showing through. So what I do tell students is you can't, I am never upset by going too much, too dark, too rich. That can't happen. I will be upset or not upset, but go, oh shoot, if I don't have enough pigment on the board, on the paper. The one that I showed you here in my studio, this dark sunset one, I'll just show you really quick, that I'm going to go back and darken some of this stuff because I want more pigment, and I know that I'm going to be happier having it more solid, not quite as washed in through some of these areas. So that's my theory. I say err on the side of dark. Don't be afraid of the dark. Go dark, because then your lights just bounce off of dark, and there's shadow under everything, and no matter how highly lit it is or how high key it is. And this is just kind of more of the same in terms of the trees with the 305, and then I'm just going for something darker and richer than the local color, so that I have those layers of it underneath that sky as I key up. There's essences of that scumbled in the upper right portion of the sky. You can see the darker stuff coming through. And so the sky was achieved by just a lot of scumbling and blending with pastel. I don't use my hands to blend anything. I try and make the pastels do that work. And also that can happen depending on, some people like very blended things. I don't blend my work, but in a sky that's gradating like this, I may not want it to be, completely rough. So it's all kind of just blended with the pastels working together. Yeah, so I don't use any instruments of blending, whatever those little things are, or even my hands. I did back in the days when I was working on Canson, but these days, no blending by anything other than pastels, playing them off of one another. Oh, do you only use new pastels or hard pastels for your underpainting? I use that 305 for all those darks. The local color or the other bits of color are not necessarily new pastel, but if they're a soft pastel, I really look for pure pigment and never too soft. And if it is a softer pastel, which most are softer than new pastels, then I just apply a less pressure. I don't want to fill in all that tooth. I want to get a sheer result from the wash process. So I do use a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot, but several Sennelier pastels are good because they're a good, soft but and nice pure pigment. A lot of the skies, I go to a Sennelier magenta or fuchsia, a kind of a bluish purple they have that's very dark and pure pigment. And what I do is well, as you could see in that one, the Sunset Cypress, where the red that I used, or it was kind of an orangey red in the trees, really the result wasn't quite what I was after. That I would have rather. So sometimes I pick something up and put it down. It's like, oh, I don't know why I did that. But so when I find colors that work well with underpainting, they become go-to colors for particular things. So I do have a batch of go-to underpainting colors, and there are Senneliers in that. I'm trying to think of what else. Sometimes I use Terri Ludwig. Those are a little softer, and to be honest, I find it hard. I use more Ludwig on the surface as opposed to underpainting, because I find that there's little essences of white in even the darkest pigments. It's very hard to find that pure pigment. So that's the key for me, is that it has to have pure pigment. New pastels have some, like a yellow, bright yellow, that works good. And there are some dark red that works well that I use. It's kind of those are go-to colors because I found that they work well, they stay sheer. But I don't limit myself to new pastels for the underpainting. It so happens that there are several, and then the 305 is the main, and with other, I supplement it with others. And Sennelier is coming to my mind the most readily right now. Yeah. Okay. All in new pastels. So gay, that's kind of the same thing. They are not all new pastels. They are all the darks are 305 new pastel. It can vary on the rest of the surface. So new pastel also has a very, very dark blue. So sometimes if I just want a good cool note in a blue and dark, I'll use that because I know it works well. I know it won't gum up the surface. When I experiment or just try a different color, sometimes, I'll go, oh, it turned out a little too soft. I put it on a little too heavily. So in my wash, it filled in the tooth a little more solidly than I would like. So, I've learned that just by, trial and error. And that's why I do have go-to colors for certain things. And I do not use colored pencils, Letty. I have a couple that I use occasionally for signatures. I use a wrap signature pencil. They're down to just these little pieces. I really, it's not even worth it to show you because they're no longer available. And I've got 3 little pieces, and so I've been kind of looking at other replacements. Charcoal pencils would be kind of the #1 replacement for the pencil I have. It was it's a general pencil, but it was very firm, not a soft thing, and kind of a waxiness. So, it went down really good. But that's also disappearing. So my first choice there would be charcoal pencils. And then I do have a few colors for if I have a dark area and need a lighter signature. But that's it, other than that, they don't appear in my work. And the size I usually use, it just varies, but I try to stay to standard sizes. And 12 by 16 and 16 by 20 lately have been good sizes for me. When I went to Catalina, I just took small things. I did 8 by 10s, a couple 10 by 10s. And this painting that I showed you, the big sunset, it's not that big, but it's 12 by 20. And I'm finding that I like that proportion versus a 2:1. I've done a lot of 8 by 16s. Sometimes that's a little narrow. So I'm kind of adding an inch or so to my height, or whatever, the narrowest way. So it's a little bit more than half of what the length is. So I've got 12 by 20s going, and 10 by 16 are some sizes that I've cut recently. And I order my frames from pictureframe.com. So they do plein air frames. They have a lot of selection, and I've found some frames that I really work, and I just continue to use those a lot too. I don't use them exclusively, but mostly. This particular frame, which some things in my back, that yellow, or it's not yellow, it's gold frame up on the shelf behind me is one of them. Oh, here's this painting that you saw the step by step, or the underpainting stuff. And I don't know if you can see that frame. I like it because it's kind of traditional in approach, but it's a little sleeker than some of the carved. So it's a little more modern, and it's traditional and modern, I think. That's the way I see it. And it comes in the silver with the gold inside. It comes with black with gold inside, and it comes in gold with black. By that, I mean, it looks like a fillet, but it's not. It's part of the frame. It's the little inside.
The good thing also with pictureframes.com is that you could put your image on, see it on the screen, what it looks like.
Yeah, exactly. That's fun.
Mhm.
I love doing that. So yeah, that's where I go for my frames. I have other framing sources too, but I think the majority of them come from there.
And
So,
we had a person want to know what.
type of glass I use is a museum glass, and it is not the True View Museum, but they have an art glass, and it really is as anti-reflective, clear, looks, and I frame up against the glass. Some people don't think that's copacetic, but I do. I kind of want to get everything, eliminate as many moving parts as I can, and the spacers. Unless somebody were to tell me, don't you, oh, that's bad, then I'm going to eliminate them and have the painting right up to the surface. It really looks so there. And it's UV, it's not the 99 or whatever the True View is, but it's up there like 78% UV protection.
And what do you mount your art paper on?
I'm sorry, I missed.
What is what are you mounting your UArt paper on? What's your back, or how do you mount it?
Yeah, I use, oh, well, this was a mistake. I get it two ways. Sometimes I get it on the foam board. I order it pre-cut. So there's those premium boards from Dakota.
Okay.
So I just order the size. I don't mount myself. And so this is 8-ply museum board. I have for years have ordered from Dakota the 4-ply mounted paper. I ordered Wallace that way, and now UArt is mounted on big sheets of it, and so I cut it to size, and that makes it a lot more affordable. Then I have bought some of the premiums that are already pre-cut, and I love those. They're lovely. But when I ordered 5 sheets of 26 by 40, 8-ply, I thought I was getting the lightweight stuff, and it's double the mat of a museum board, and it is to cut. It goes through blades like crazy. It takes so much work. And so I've just recently used the last piece of that. I've had it for a while. I don't recommend it because unless you're working in it the full size, it's very hard to cut. And the fact is, there's not a whole lot of benefit to the extra thickness of it. Once it's cut, it's like, okay, well, it looks pretty harmless, but it was hard to cut them. And I could cut the same way with a 4-ply museum board. So that is my regular surface. And somebody wanted to see recent work. This is one I just did in Catalina. So that was a plein air painting. It was on a really slopey surface too. Hello, down at the water. Okay, let me see. And you want to see my studio better?
Sure.
I'm just going to hold up I'm working on my computer, and I'll just hold it up if that works for you guys. I'm not sure how else to do it. I know when I'm hosting a meeting, I can switch to another source camera, but I don't think I can do it now as a participant. So basically what you've got is there's my easel, and all around is shelving, and that's on the other side as well. That's not very, oh, it's a light. Yeah. So both sides have these double shelves, and they're just, full of framed, and then, I can lean unframed pieces. My right below there are my pastel bins. And here, disconnect this. Those two trays that are full of pastels, let's see, do I have it on there? Are kind of go-to pastels. So they've all come out of these boxes at some point, but I use them. So I tend to go into these trays first when I'm looking for pastels. And then if I don't find what I need, I go to the bins. And let's see what else is there. It's not very, I have a gate leg table that I use on the left of me with my alcohol. I've still got things from my Catalina trip that aren't put away. So that's my workspace. And then through the French doors is my office, which is my computer, my printer and a desk. And there's paintings. Here, we'll go out here. So I have another 2 shelves to store paintings, and my desk, and my printer. And it's nice, there's a double sliding door there, and it goes into the kitchen. I think my husband's in there making something right now. So this is in the house. And now here's this room where I do my desk, and then into the pasteling room, which is where I tend to now spend most of my time. And there we are, just more and pastels. And they're really kind of a mess right now. I don't know about you guys. I'm very anal. And why I decided to be a pastel artist, I don't know, because, it's eternal dust and controlling the mess. And anyway, yeah. So I don't know also how many. The reason I even suggest that somebody doesn't know about this is because I only discovered this a few years ago. Skin Safer. Do you guys know about this? It totally works to keep your hands clean. And I just stick my fingers in, the ones I use the most, and put this lotion on. And then I do it, usually get it on twice, pretty good. And it's amazing. Your hands will look like a disaster, but they wash clean. So it's a protective barrier cream. Anybody, Skin Safer from Dakota. It's great stuff. But I've been working in pastel since 1987, and I just started using that a few years ago. I saw Barbara Benedetti Newton do a demo in Tacoma, Washington. It was an IAPS exhibit, and she was using it. So that's just been 2 years ago, no, 3 years ago.
Thank you for that tip.
Store paintings in a flat file before they are framed. Or I store them, if it's something I really like, it just stays on one of these shelves, and I can lay it against the framed pieces. It doesn't hurt them, or I put something to make sure there is no damage to the frames. That's always a concern too. Is keeping frames from getting damaged, and keeping glass clean and all that sort of things. But yes, my unframed paintings will kind of sit around until I'm ready to frame them. So I can really have 2 layers all on these shelves, which are, you know, unframed paintings just tilted up against a framed painting. But then if there's something that I don't think is going to make it to a frame, I will put it in a clear bag. And I have a bin in, I have another workspace, which is my framing area, which is a 3rd car garage. And it's nice to have that out there, you know, all that work stuff there. But I have a bin of unframed paintings, and they are in clear bags. And I think that's something purists might say, oh, clear bags, they're not archival, but they are very handy to keep unframed paintings in. And they don't damage the paintings. So I've done that for quite some time. Okay.
I think you've answered all the questions. Anybody else have anything they want to learn or know from Terri, or ask another question?
Yes, I do. You said clear bag or clear back?
I'm sorry, Gary.
What did you put the unframed paintings in? Was it clear bag or clear back?
Clear bag.
B-A-C-K?
No, bag. B-A-G.
Oh, okay. Okay,
Yeah.
good.
I'll show you. This is that one of that California one. I had it, I have a frame for it, but I just stored it temporarily in this. And I get a size like 12 by 16. So anything 12 by 16 and smaller, I can put in those. And I just trim them down and fold them over and tape them in the back.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And yeah, clearbags.com. It's a plural, clearbags.com. And the one thing I would recommend is you check to make sure the stickum is on the outside of the bag, not on the flap. So you don't get hung up on the flap with the adhesive. It has a pull-off strip. You want that to be on the bag, not on the flap.
Terri, are you going to do your online Giverny class?
Yeah, Betty, you know, I have been in a super, super busy 2 months at least. It's really just been intensely busy. And so I have that in the back of my mind. I definitely want to do it, but I just haven't been able to schedule it in. I need to have a clearer time frame because I do want to do that. Yes. Yeah. I'd rather go back in person.
Me too.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll be doing a workshop with Giverny would be the subject. And Betty went to Giverny with me. 2015, was it?
I can't remember. It was a long time ago.
Yeah, I think it was 2015. And we got to paint in the gardens.
Oh, yeah, it was great.
Mm.